I stood in the hallway for a full minute before I dropped my keys. It wasn't the noise that stopped me. It was the silence. My parents' house in Denver usually had a specific sound at 4 in the afternoon. The hum of the refrigerator, the low drone of my father's news channel, but mostly it had the sound of claws on hardwood. Jasper always knew when I was home. He knew the sound of my car engine before I even turned onto the cul-de-sac. By the time I unlocked the front door, he would be spinning in circles on the rug, making that low, happy whine that meant I was finally back. Today there was nothing. Just dead, heavy air. I walked into the kitchen. My mother, Mary, was standing at the island folding laundry. She didn't look up. She smoothed a crease in a towel with a precision that made my stomach turn. "Where is he?" I asked. My voice sounded strange in my own ears. Too calm. Too steady. She placed the towel on a stack. "We rehomed him." I didn't blink. I didn't breathe. The words hung there like smoke. Rehomed. "Kevin's kids needed the new gaming setup for the summer," she said, finally looking at me. Her eyes were blank, like she was reciting a grocery list. "Those systems are expensive, Alyssa." And Jasper was just extra expense. "You know how it is. He's better off somewhere else. You'll get over it." She picked up another towel. She went back to folding. As if she hadn't just traded a living, breathing soul for plastic and wires. As if she hadn't just sold the only thing in this house that had ever loved me unconditionally. I looked at her hands. They were steady. I looked at the empty space where Jasper's water bowl used to be. And in that moment, something inside me snapped. It wasn't a loud snap. It didn't make me scream or cry or throw things. It was the sound of a bridge collapsing underwater. Quiet. Final. I didn't say another word. I turned around and walked out. Drop a comment and let me know where you're listening from and what time it is for you right now. I'd love to know who's part of our community. I didn't go far. I sat in my car at the end of the cul-de-sac engine, running air conditioning, blasting against the sweat that had broken out on my neck. I didn't cry. Crying takes time. Crying blurs your vision, and right now I needed to see everything with absolute clarity. I opened my laptop on the passenger seat and tethered it to my phone. My parents thought this was over. They thought the transaction was done, the dog was gone, and I would eventually tire myself out with grief and come back inside for dinner. They were banking on my emotions. But they forgot what I do for a living. I solve problems. And right now, Jasper was just a misplaced asset that needed to be recovered. I didn't look for lost dog posters. I looked for sales listings. My fingers flew across the keyboard. Craigslist, Facebook Marketplace next door. I filtered by border collie mail and rehoming fee. I set the radius to 50 miles. My mother wouldn't have driven far. She's efficient, not thorough. She would have wanted him gone fast before I landed. 20 minutes. That's all it took. I found a listing posted 4 hours ago. Purebred border collie. Great temperament, needs a yard. $200 rehoming fee. The photo was blurry, taken in a garage I didn't recognize, but I knew that white patch on the chest. I knew the specific intelligent tilt of his head. It was 40 miles south, a town called Castle Rock. I texted the number. "I can be there in 45 minutes. I have cash. I'll pay double if you hold him." The reply came in 30 seconds. "Sold. Come through." I put the car in drive. I didn't speed. I didn't run red lights. I drove with the terrifying calmness of someone who has absolutely nothing left to lose. I stopped at the bank and pulled $500 from the ATM. It was rent money, but rent didn't matter. Nothing mattered but the heartbeat waiting for me 40 miles away. When I pulled up to the address, it was a normal house, a family with a minivan in the driveway. A man came out to meet me looking confused. He probably expected a happy family looking for a pet, not a woman in a business suit with eyes like flint. "You the one who texted?" he asked. I didn't waste time on pleasantries. "Where is he?" He led me to the backyard. Jasper was tied to a fence post looking small and confused. When he saw me, he didn't bark. He just let out this soft, broken exhale and pressed his body against the chain link. I dropped to my knees. I buried my hands in his fur, checking for injuries, checking for reality. He was real. He was warm. He licked the salt off my cheek that I didn't even know was there. "He's a good dog," the man said, scratching his neck. "Your folks said they couldn't handle his energy." Said he needed a farm or something. My folks lied, I said, standing up. I handed him the cash. I didn't count it in front of him. I just shoved the stack into his hand. Here. Keep the change. He's going home. I loaded Jasper into the back seat. He laid his head on the center console, watching me, making sure I wasn't going to disappear again. The drive back was silent. The sun was setting over the Rockies, turning the sky a bruised purple. I felt a strange, cold weight settling in my chest. It wasn't relief. It was resolve. I had retrieved the asset. Now I had to secure the perimeter. I pulled into my parents' driveway an hour later. The lights were on in the living room. I could see the blue flicker of the television. They were in there watching the news, probably wondering if I was sulking in a park somewhere. I unlocked the front door. Jasper trotted in beside me, his claws clicking on the hardwood, the sound that was supposed to be gone forever. My father looked up from his recliner. His mouth opened, but no sound came out. My mother froze with a wine glass halfway to her lips. They looked at the dog. Then they looked at me. I waited for them to speak. I waited for the excuse, the lie, the "we were just thinking of you." You bought him back, my mother finally whispered. She sounded offended. No, I said. My voice was steady, devoid of any warmth. I bought back what you stole. I didn't wait for a response. I walked past them down the hallway and into my bedroom. I closed the door. I turned the lock. And for the first time in my life, I realized that the lock wasn't there to keep intruders out. It was to keep my family away. The next morning, the house smelled like vanilla and bacon. It was a scent designed to trigger nostalgia, a sensory trap laid carefully at 8 in the morning. I walked into the kitchen. My father was at the table reading a tablet. My mother was flipping pancakes at the stove. The domestic perfection was almost impressive in its audacity. They were resetting the stage. They were pretending that yesterday, the theft, the chase, the lock on my door had been a bad dream. A glitch in the program that could be overwritten with breakfast. Good morning, Alyssa, my father said. He didn't look up, but his tone was light. Mom made blueberry. I didn't answer. I poured a cup of black coffee. I picked up Jasper's bowl, filled it with water, and placed it on the floor. Don't be like this, my mother said, her back to me. We're a family. We forgive each other. That's what families do. I looked at her back. I wondered if she truly believed that, or if she just needed me to believe it so the dynamic wouldn't change. I took my coffee and walked back to my room. 5 minutes later, the music on my phone cut out. I looked at the screen. No service. I checked the Wi-Fi icon. Gone. I walked to the window. I could see the utility box on the side of the house. The cover was open. They hadn't just unplugged the router, they had cut me off. It was a power move, a teenage punishment for a 26-year-old woman. They expected me to panic. They expected me to come downstairs, phone in hand, begging for the password, forced to apologize to get my connection back to the world. They wanted to remind me who owned the infrastructure. But they forgot that infrastructure is what I do. I didn't go downstairs. I grabbed my laptop bag. I leashed Jasper. I walked out the front door past my father, who was now standing in the hallway waiting for the confrontation. Going somewhere, he asked. Data plan not working. Work, I said. I didn't stop. I drove to a coffee shop 3 blocks away. I bought a dark roast I didn't need just to rent the table. I tethered my laptop to the shop's Wi-Fi. And then I opened the banking portal. I stared at the account labeled Family Emergency Fund. People always ask me how I let it get this bad. Why did a smart, independent woman share a joint account with her parents in her mid-20s? They assume I was naive, but they don't understand the mechanics of normalization. It's the boiling frog. You don't jump into a pot of boiling water. You get in when it's lukewarm. It started when I was 22. Just for emergencies, Alyssa. In case something happens to us. Then it was, can we borrow $50 for groceries until payday? Then it was authorized user cards. Then it was autopay. I had been conditioned to view my financial boundaries as selfishness. Every time I tried to separate, I was accused of not trusting them. I was trained to believe that my money was our money, but their bad decisions were their own. The abuse didn't start with selling my dog. That was just the temperature hitting 212 degrees. I clicked on transaction history. I filtered for the last 12 months. I felt a cold clinical detachment as I scrolled. I was looking for emergencies. I was looking for medical bills, furnace repairs, flat tires. There were none. April 12th. The High Ridge Country Club, the $450. May 3rd, auto draft Kevin's car loan, $380. June 15th, Ticketmaster, $600. July 1st, Disney Resorts deposit, $2,000. I stopped scrolling. My finger hovered over the trackpad. A Disney trip. The family vacation they had mentioned vaguely on the phone, the one I wasn't invited to because work is so busy for you, sweetie. I was paying for my own exclusion. I looked at the recurring charges. Netflix, Hulu, Spotify Premium, a wine subscription box, my brother's car insurance. I pulled up the calculator app. I started adding, not the groceries, not the gas, just the luxuries, just the theft disguised as love. 4 years. The total sat in the bottom right corner of my screen, blinking like a neon sign. $18,500? I rubbed my eyes. I tried to summon some sense of heartbreak, some daughterly grief. But there was only clarity. This wasn't a breakdown. It was a balance sheet. And I was the only one operating in the red. I took a sip of the coffee. It was cold. I wasn't a daughter to them. I was a subscription service. And I had just found the cancel button. I didn't close the laptop. I didn't hesitate. I opened a new tab and logged into the high-yield savings account I had opened 30 minutes ago, the one with a password my mother would never guess because it wasn't my birthday or the name of a pet she had sold. I went back to the joint account. I clicked transfer funds. The screen asked for an amount. I looked at the balance, $18,542.16. I typed in $18,542.16. A warning popped up. This will deplete the account. Are you sure? I thought about the 4 years of skipped vacations. I thought about the lunches I didn't buy and the clothes I didn't wear. I thought about Jasper tied to a fence post in Castle Rock, wondering why I hadn't come for him. I clicked yes. The loading bar spun for 3 seconds. Then a green checkmark. Transfer complete. I sat back in the hard wooden chair. I expected to feel guilty. I expected the daughter in me to panic about bouncing their mortgage check or the electricity bill. But the daughter in me was gone. There was only the auditor. I wasn't done. I went to the recurring payments tab. It was a list of their entitlements. Netflix, the country club dues, the wine box, and there at the bottom, Kevin's car insurance. I clicked cancel. 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 For Kevin's insurance, I felt a spark of dark satisfaction. He was driving a luxury SUV he couldn't afford, protected by a policy paid for by the sister he mocked. I clicked terminate policy. Reason for cancellation, the site asked. I typed unauthorized user. I closed the laptop. I finished my cold coffee. I walked back to the house. The driveway was empty. My father was probably at the golf course I just stopped paying for. My mother was likely shopping. I had a window. I didn't pack everything. I packed what mattered. My birth certificate. My passport. The external hard drive with my portfolio. I cleared my closet of my suits and my favorite coats. I packed Jasper's remaining toys, his bed, and the bag of high-end kibble they had deemed too expensive. It took 45 minutes. I loaded the trunk of my sedan. I didn't leave a note. Notes are for people who want to be found. I drove west toward the mountains to the one place I knew they wouldn't look. Aunt Patricia lived in a mid-century A-frame in Golden. She was my father's older sister, the black sheep, who had been estranged from the family for a decade. I never knew why. I was told she was difficult and cold. Now I suspected difficult just meant she had boundaries. I pulled into her driveway. She was in the garden pruning rose bushes with vicious precision. When she saw me get out of the car with a suitcase and a dog, she didn't look surprised. She looked vindicated. Finally, she said, snapping her shears shut. We sat in her living room. I told her everything. The dog, the phones, the emergency fund. I told her I drained it. Patricia listened, sipping tea that smelled like peppermint and iron. She didn't gasp. She didn't offer platitudes. When I finished, she stood up and walked to a heavy iron, safe in the corner of her office. You didn't steal anything, Alyssa, she said, spinning the dial. In fact, you barely took back half of what is legally yours. What do you mean? I asked. I calculated it. The $18,000 was mostly my deposits. She pulled out a thick manila envelope and dropped it on the coffee table. It landed with a heavy thud. Your grandmother, my mother, didn't trust your father with money. She knew he felt the world owed him a living. When she passed, she didn't leave him a dime. Patricia slid a document toward me. She left it to you. I picked up the paper. It was a copy of a will and a trust instrument. The Alyssa Morgan Custodial Trust. She left you $50,000, Alyssa, to be released to you upon your 25th birthday. Your father was the custodian. He was supposed to turn it over to you last year. My hands started to shake. I never saw this. They told me Grandma died. Broke. They lied, Patricia said, her voice hard. They hid the trust. And then they convinced you to open a joint savings account so they could commingle the funds. They used your own inheritance to pay for their lifestyle and then convinced you to top it up with your paycheck when the trust money ran low. I looked at the numbers, the dates, the signatures. It wasn't just financial abuse. It wasn't just mooching. They had embezzled my inheritance and then tricked me into refilling the pot so they could keep stealing. They aren't just bad parents, I whispered, the realization cold as ice in my veins. They're criminals. Patricia poured me more tea. So, what are you going to do about it? The first sign that the bomb had detonated wasn't a noise. It was a vibration. My new phone, the one with the number only Aunt Patricia and the bank had buzzed on the coffee table. It was an unknown number. I looked at Patricia. She didn't flinch. She just nodded at the screen. It begins. I let it go to voicemail. Then it buzzed again. And again. A stream of texts started flooding in, bypassing the silence I had tried to build. Kevin, you stole everything. Dad, pick up the phone. The bank says you drained it? That is our money. Mom, how could you do this to us? We can't pay the mortgage. Call me right now or I'm calling the police. I stared at the screen, the blue light illuminating the darkened living room. How did they get this number? They probably called your old work, Patricia said, turning a page of her book. Or they guessed. Or they bullied one of your friends. Desperation makes people very resourceful. I felt a flicker of the old panic that conditioned reflex to fix the problem to smooth over the rough edges so everyone could go back to being comfortable. But then I looked at the trust documents still sitting on the table. The proof of their theft. The panic cooled into something harder. Then came the headlights. High beams swept across the front window, cutting through the curtains. Tires crunched violently on the gravel driveway. Car doors slammed 1, 2, 3. Open the door! It was Kevin. He was shouting before he even hit the porch steps. I know you're in there. We saw the car. Jasper let out a low warning growl from his spot at my feet. I reached down to soothe him, my hand steady. The pounding started. It wasn't a knock. It was a physical assault on the wood. My father was screaming my name. My mother was wailing a high-pitched sound designed to pierce through walls and generate guilt. Alyssa, please, we just want to talk. We're your family. I stood up and walked to the window. I peeked through the blinds. It was a chaotic scene. My father was red-faced, hammering on the doorframe. Kevin was pacing the lawn, kicking at Patricia's prize rose bushes. My mother was on her knees on the porch, sobbing theatrically, looking around to see if the neighbors were watching. A week ago, this display would have broken me. I would have opened the door just to make the noise stop. I would have apologized for their anger. But tonight, watching them through the glass, I didn't see power. I saw biology. In behavioral psychology, there is a term for this. It's called an extinction burst. When you stop reinforcing a behavior, when the rat presses the lever and no food pellet comes out, the rat doesn't just walk away. It presses the lever harder. It bites the bar. It screeches. It escalates its efforts, wildly trying to force the system to give it what it wants. They weren't grieving a lost daughter. They were biting the bar because the pellet dispenser had finally stopped working. They were escalating because for the first time in 4 years their control had hit a wall it couldn't break. They're going to break the door down, I said quietly. Let them try, Patricia said. She hadn't moved from her chair. That door is solid oak, and I have cameras. I'm calling the cops, Kevin screamed from the lawn, pointing his phone at the house. I'm reporting a theft. You hear me, Alyssa? You're going to jail. The irony was so sharp it almost made me laugh. The thieves were threatening to call the police on the victim. Do you want to call them first? Patricia asked. No, I said. I turned away from the window. I want to finish this. I picked up the manila envelope containing the trust documents. I picked up the printout of the bank transfer. I grabbed a pen. I'm not hiding anymore, I said. If they want a confrontation, I'll give them one. But it's not going to be the conversation they think it is. I walked to the door. I could feel the vibrations of my father's fists against the wood. I took a breath, unlocked the deadbolt, and threw it open. The noise stopped instantly. My father's fist hung in midair. My mother froze mid-sob. Kevin stopped pacing. They looked at me, expecting the scared, compliant girl who paid for their vacations. I stepped out onto the porch, closing the door behind me so Jasper wouldn't run out. I looked at them, really looked at them, and realized for the first time how small they were. You wanted to talk, I said. My voice was ice. So talk. I stepped out onto the porch and the night air felt sharp and clean against my face. My father was standing 3 feet away, his chest heaving, his face a map of righteous indignation. My mother was wiping mascara from her cheeks. Kevin was holding his phone up like a shield, recording me, waiting for the moment I would scream so he could have his viral victim moment. But I didn't scream. I didn't even raise my voice. I held up the manila envelope Aunt Patricia had given me. You said I stole from you, I said. My voice was quiet, but it carried in the silence of the yard. You drained the account, my father shouted, pointing a shaking finger at me. That was $18,000. That is our money. You think because your name is on the account you can just take it. I didn't take your money, Dad, I said. I pulled the first document out of the envelope. I recovered my trust fund. He froze. His arm dropped. The color drained from his face so fast it looked like a physical blow. I know about Grandma's will, I continued, stepping forward. I know about the $50,000 she left to me. I know you were the custodian. And I know that instead of turning it over when I turned 25, you hid the paperwork, commingled the funds with a joint savings account, and spent the last 4 years draining it on vacations and country club dues. My mother let out a small strangled noise. Kevin lowered his phone, looking between us, confused. He clearly hadn't been part of that particular lie. That's complicated, my father stammered. The bluster was gone. He looked suddenly old. We used that money for the family. For you. Living expenses. We were going to pay it back. No, I said. You weren't. I ran the numbers. This isn't a family dispute anymore. This is custodial fraud. It's a felony. And based on the amount you embezzled, it carries a prison sentence of up to 5 years. I handed him the envelope. He took it automatically, his hands trembling. Inside that envelope is an audit, I said. It details every unauthorized withdrawal you made from the trust. It details the $18,000 I recovered today. And it details the remaining $32,000 you still owe me. $32,000, my mother whispered. Alyssa, we don't have that kind of money. Then you have a problem, I said. Because inside that envelope is also a repayment agreement. It structures the balance as a personal loan with a fixed interest rate. If you sign it, I won't go to the police. I won't report the fraud. And I won't press charges for animal cruelty regarding Jasper. Animal cruelty, Kevin scoffed, trying to regain some ground. It's a dog, Alyssa. I turned my gaze to him. Selling a microchipped animal that doesn't belong to you is theft, Kevin. And dumping a high-drive working dog in a backyard without vetting the owners is negligence. I have the bill of sale. I have the buyer's statement. Do you really want me to add that to the police report? He shut his mouth. I looked back at my parents. They were staring at the document like it was a death warrant. You have 2 choices, I said. Option A. You sign the agreement, you start making payments next month, and you leave me the hell alone. Option B. I call the district attorney in the morning, and we let a judge decide who that money belongs to. My father looked at the paper, then at me. I saw the moment the fight left him. He wasn't looking at a daughter anymore. He was looking at a prosecutor. We're your parents, my mother cried out, taking a step toward me. How can you be so cold? We raised you. We're a family. Doesn't that mean anything to you? I looked at her, really looked at her. I saw the woman who watched me cry over a lost dog and told me to get over it. I saw the woman who bought wine subscriptions with my inheritance while I ate ramen to save money. It meant everything to me, I said. I stayed for years. I paid your bills. I fixed your problems. I tried so hard to be the daughter you wanted. I reached down and rested my hand on Jasper's head. He leaned into my leg, solid and warm. But you stopped being my family the moment you sold my heart for a gaming console. I stepped back inside. I didn't slam the door. I closed it gently, engaging the deadbolt with a soft final click. 6 months later, I was standing in a loft in downtown Denver. It wasn't huge, it wasn't a mansion, but it had 12-foot ceilings, exposed brick, and a massive window that looked out over the city lights. More importantly, it was quiet. There was no television blaring news I didn't care about. No passive-aggressive comments about my laundry. No fear that I would come home to find something missing. I poured a glass of wine, a cheap bottle I bought because I liked the label, not because a subscription service sent it to me. I walked to the window. Jasper was asleep on a rug that belonged only to him. He twitched in his sleep, chasing rabbits in a dream where he was always safe. He had gained weight. His coat was shiny. He didn't flinch when I dropped my keys anymore. My phone buzzed on the counter. It was a notification from the bank. Payment received $450. My father had signed the agreement. It took 3 weeks of silence and one letter from a lawyer I hired with the recovered funds, but he signed. Every month, like clockwork, a small piece of my stolen life came back to me. It would take them 6 years to pay off the balance. I didn't care about the money. I cared about the reminder that actions have consequences. I had blocked them on everything. Social media, email, phone. Kevin tried to bypass it once, sending a message through a mutual friend about how mom cries every day. I told the friend to block me too if they ever delivered a message like that again. They didn't. Sometimes late at night I still get the guilt. The voice in my head that sounds like my mother telling me I'm cold. Telling me I'm the villain of the story. And you know what I accepted it. There is a peace in being the villain. If being the villain means I refuse to be robbed by the people who were supposed to protect me, then I am the villain. If being the villain means I valued my dog's life over my brother's entitlement, then I am the villain. If being the villain means I finally, for the first time in 26 years, chose myself, then I will wear that title like armor. I took a sip of wine. The city below was chaotic and loud and bright. But up here, at this altitude, the air was thin and clear. I walked over to Jasper. I sat down on the floor next to him. He opened one eye, saw it was me, and let out a long, contented sigh before closing it again. I rested my head against the wall. For the first time in my life, I wasn't waiting for the other shoe to drop. I wasn't waiting for the criticism. I wasn't waiting for the theft. I was just home. If you've ever had to become the villain to save yourself, share this story. You aren't alone.